We are almost at the end of the class. In this video, I will be talking about your final speech and what you will need to do and all the information that you need to know to be able to write and deliver an amazing final persuasive speech on either a question of fact, value, or policy. Phew, we are almost done. I hope that this is exciting for you, and I hope it's exciting in a good way. I hope that you have been able to grow. Now, you started out little, and we gave an anecdote speech, then an introduction speech, then information, persuasive policy, and now you are at this final persuasive speech. And I think that when you finish the speech and you go back and compare your anecdote speech with this one, you will be impressed with the amount of work that you've done and how much you have grown. So what am I expecting from you for your delivery? This is your final speech, which is a culmination of everything that we're supposed to have learned about public speaking. So I do have a few expectations about delivery. Primarily, I would like to see you giving your speech. I don't want the cookie cutter speaker. I didn't want it when we began the class, and I certainly don't want it now. So what are your strengths? What are your quirks? What are your talents? I want you to bring these to the forefront. If I have told you that you have amazing hand gestures, that they serve to illustrate your points really well, they help to keep my attention as an audience member, then make sure that you continue to do this in your final speech. If I have noted that you have a wry sense of humor that's enjoyable, bring that to this speech. If I have told you that you have very dramatic introductions that are captivating, bring that. If I have told you that you have a calm, logical, composed style that I enjoy, bring that. These are all the things that I want you to bring of your own. I don't want you to bring somebody else's strength, just yours. So this is really important to me, that you don't try to change things up for this final speech. What has been your worst problem so far? Improve it. I'm not asking for it to be completely resolved, but I want it better than it was before. I would like you to video yourself full length so I can see you from head to toe. Now, there are times in the speech if you would like to have a closer up shot, if you would like to have a waist to head shot or shoulder to head shot, and you have a camera person who's willing to do this, that's great. I do like to see the close-ups and be able to see your facial expressions in more detail, but I don't want that to be the full speech, so I want some of the speech to be full length. I want you to be looking at the audience. One thing that I have noticed is that online students tend to treat the camera as an audience member, which is okay, except that often you're treating it as the only audience member. This isn't very realistic for how most of your speaking situations will be, and so I'd like to have you think about that for this final speech, that you should be looking not just at one person or one camera, you need to be looking at an entire room. When I spoke of delivery in a different lecture, with eye contact, we talked about breaking up your room into 3 parts: left, center, and right. And I want you to do that for this final speech. Even if you don't have 3 people who are your audience members, I mean, of course, it'd be easy if you have 3 people and you plop one person to your left, one person in front of you, and one person to your right, and then you try to look at all these people. That would be great. But you may not have 3 people. you may have one person sitting in front of you and then the camera to your right. So the temptation that I've noticed is that you may give your entire speech to the camera to the right, ignoring your real audience member. Don't do that. You can speak to your camera and then speak to your audience member in front of you, and then speak to an imaginary person, audience member, on the other side. So let's practice speaking to those three sections, even if you don't have real people with you. What I do not expect from your delivery: perfection. Get it out of your head now that you're trying to be perfect, because that's of little importance to me or to most audiences. We want to see you do the best job that you can do. I want to see you better than in your last speeches. But we've talked about how inauthentic this whole idea of perfection and cookie cutter is. So don't even try to attain it. The more I see of you, flaws and all, the better it is. I like to get to know you when you're up there speaking. I don't really like to get to know this fake persona. Let's talk about topics. What should you give this final speech about? Now, I recommend that you give this speech about something that you care about, because if you choose something that you have just picked off an internet site as a good speech topic, it will probably fall flat. Now, what you care about will change in your life from day to day, from week to week, from year to year. If I were to give a speech right now, a persuasive speech, I probably would be influenced by a major happening in my life recently. My beloved beagle, Stella Bell, passed away recently. Now, I love Stella Bell. She was probably the perfect dog in the world. She was little, she was lovable, she had a personality, she was enormously chubby in the cutest possible way. She adored me, she adored our family, she loved us so palpably, and it's hard that she's gone. So I'm influenced by this and passionate about her and my emotions to losing her. So I might choose something about dogs that would, so I'd be able to bring my emotional energy to this. Maybe I'd give a persuasive speech about the value of dogs. What is it that dogs bring into our life? Why are we better with a dog than without a dog? So I might do that. I might also just kind of go with this medical or health perspective. Are we better if we have a dog? Are there really tangible health benefits to having a dog? Maybe I'll talk about breeds. So I mentioned she was a beagle. Maybe I'm going to convince you that a beagle is the perfect dog, because I think they might possibly be. I'd have to do some research to find out, but I think they just might be. They're little, but they're energetic, they're lovable. Anyways, I haven't done my research, so I won't actually give you the speech, but these are the types of things that you have to think about as you're going to give a persuasive speech. We're going to have to get pathos in here, and if you don't care about your topic, it's really hard to get pathos in genuinely. I recommend avoiding popular topics, so capital punishment, abortion, legalization of marijuana, unless you have some kind of new idea that we haven't heard before or that most people haven't heard before. There's really little of interest of capital punishment arguments that trot out the same proofs as everyone else. I've heard these topics for years and years and years, and they are just not enjoyable, entertaining, or even useful. They're a waste of time. So I want you to choose something that is going to be an idea that you can craft this argument. I don't want you to take an argument that everyone else has been given for all these years. Now, I mentioned unless you have a new idea. Now, there are new ideas about topics such as this out there, and I have heard a few interesting speeches with these topics that I hadn't heard before. Probably the best one that I heard was many years ago, a student giving a persuasive speech on abortion, and decided to just approach the speech as a question of fact. And this was somebody who was not pro-choice and did not want to do all the same arguments. And it was interesting because actually we didn't learn until about halfway through the speech that this even was a speech on abortion. In the beginning, the student very carefully laid out a logical framework in which the student established what is the hospital definition of life. And they took and gave us evidence and proofs for hospital considers that life is present in a person when they have brain waves, and they gave evidence about the brain waves. And then secondly, they gave a set of persuasive information about heartbeat. And so half of the speech was just about those things. And we don't know exactly where it's going, although I think I assumed that it was going to go to a euthanasia argument. But it didn't. After, we're kind of on the page here of what is the medical definition of life, then comes in the abortion topic, in which now the student presented the information about when does a heartbeat begin in a fetus and when do brain waves begin in a fetus, and using those as the definition of life, and crafting this argument in a very different way than I had heard before. Obviously, it was a much longer speech. I just tried to describe it in 30 seconds, but compelling because it was a very different way of looking at it, and it stuck with me for decades now. Your topic doesn't have to be super serious as long as it's structured well with the appropriate supports. I was just talking with a student the other day and remembering one of my favorite persuasive speeches had to do with pet rocks. Do you know what a pet rock is? When I was a kid, way back in the old days, I think this was probably back in the 70s, there was this very odd trend in which rocks, just like a stone, a rock, was sold, and people would put eyes and clothes on it and a smile. They would call it a pet rock. And it was kind of a funny, snarky, kind of laugh at yourself sort of thing. And I had a student give a persuasive speech about that the audience should adopt pet rocks because they are the perfect companion. And they had a well-structured speech. It had an introduction, body, conclusion, transitions. There were these main points. They were supported by evidence, and it was fascinating, and it was fun, but it was a well-done speech. So you don't have to do these great topics about the world and worldviews and ideas and life and death. Sometimes they can be fun. All right, ideas. All right, a couple things that just kind of occurred to me as I was writing this. Since your audience is a Lee University set of students, that just kind of means there's lots of things that you could include here, make your speech really specific. Lee University should do this. They should not do this. Textbooks are unnecessary in most college classes. Online education is worse. It's the same or superior to traditional college classes. College students should not date or marry while in college. You should eat locally produced foods. Coffee beans are a miracle food. Just a few ideas that are out there. What is your goal for this speech, and I want to make sure that as you're choosing your topic that you're reasonable about what the goal is. All right. You don't have to get me from hating a topic all the way to changing my actions now. I mean, it does seem kind of unlikely that you will take me from hate all the way to changing my actions right now in 6 to 8 minutes, or 7 to 10 minutes, or 8 to 10 minutes. However long your speech is, it is unlikely that you're going to get me all the way from hate to changing now, right? So let's not even try to do that. Let's think of persuasion as a continuum, and that your goal is going to be much more reasonable. I don't need to take you from one extreme to the other extreme. I just need you to move me a step away from my initial position. So if I hate your topic right now, see if in that time you could move me to dislike. That would be a gain. Or let's say I dislike your idea right now. See if you could move me to okay. I'm okay with your idea. Or if I'm already okay with your idea, see if you can move me to, I think it's good. If I already think it's good, see if you could move me to it's well advised, that it's better than good, it's very good. And then see if you could take me from very good to great. If I already think it's a great idea, let's see if you can get me into a rabid fan of this idea. Just one step, though. You can't do all of these steps. So let's just be reasonable and just do one step away from my initial position. So that's what your goal should be here. Your goal shouldn't be trying to do radical change in 5 minutes. You can also get me to stop and think, so that I'm not necessarily changing right now, but I'm going to think about my position, maybe a little bit long term. So it's kind of a stop and think about this. And that can work as well. Now, I have this love-hate relationship with persuasive speeches that deal with skin cancer and with sun tanning. I grew up in California. Southern California mostly. I was a beach girl. I could spend all day, all week, all summer, all year on a beach. It's perfect. I grew up in the era before we really thought about skin cancer, and we thought that tanning was healthy and that you look healthy when you're tan. The tanner you are, the healthier you are. So, if you can't exercise and if you're not eating right, at least you can go out there and be a nice dark brown and you're healthy. Everything has changed since then, and that's not the way we look at suntans now. They're not healthy. They can have a high correlation rate with skin cancer. So I find that when I hear persuasive speeches on skin cancer, that it's hard for me to really make a change. I'm loving sun tanning, and if you want me to stop sun tanning, you have to get me to the stop and think, where you go, you know what, maybe it's not such a good idea. Yeah, you'll be brown, but you know what, you might lose your nose someday, or hey, you might even die. But one speech rarely does it for me. I have to hear about 3, 4, and after I hear 3 or 4 in a short amount of time, it hits me at a level that's deeper and that will change my actions. Now, I'm not telling you all to go out and write a persuasive speech against suntanning because it causes skin cancer. My point here is that we have to think about this persuasive goal, and one speech isn't going to get me from thinking that a suntan is a lovely, healthy effect all the way to don't you dare go out in the sun without sunscreen. it's going to just take me one step at a time, and I'll have to hear a bunch of speeches before I might actually change my actions. That's expected, it's reasonable, it's okay. On the other hand, if somebody wants to give a speech about avoiding sun tanning because of skin cancer, you'll have a ready audience member because I have a pool at my house and it has been calling to me. And I would like to go out and get to a nice toasty brown, but I shouldn't. So I won't. This speech should feature some elements that we've already been working on in the class. There are these elements that I don't want you to forget at this last speech. They're pretty basic, but an introduction, body, conclusion. You need to have a strong intro. You need to grab my attention, not just quietly, hello, please pay attention to me. I want the pay attention to me introduction. And it should tell us what you're talking about and give that preview. And then I want the body of your speech. I need identifiable main points. I should be able to outline your speech while you're talking. And then your conclusion should have some kind of device that wraps it up nicely and, well, give a summary of what it is that you've talked about. Leave the audience feeling good. You need to have transitions. I want to be able to identify your transitions throughout the entire speech. This should be given from a keyword outline. Do not start writing your speeches out word for word. Do not begin reading them. And if you've already been doing the reading, stop it. I want you to think about your audience, to analyze it, and put appropriate information in the speech based on who's listening to your speech. I want you to provide support for your points. Your supports should be logical. I also want you to have a visual aid for this speech. Now, it is possible that there is a class in the future that I may have eliminated this requirement, but unless I've specifically told you no visual aid, then I'm going to expect you to have one visual aid in this speech. Review the chapter in your text, gives lots of great information about visual aids, and use that information in order to decide what it is that you're going to want to use. A visual aid could be used to help you with clarity. So if you have a confusing idea or point, the visual aid will help it be more understandable. That's great. Or a visual aid could be used to get you moving. Maybe I've told you that you need to use more gestures or more movement. A visual aid can help you do this. You have an object, you lift it up, you are pointing to things, and so it could help you to do that. Or perhaps your visual aid is just going to be something kind of interesting that when you bring it to the audience's attention, they go, oh, whoa, that's really interesting. That's cool. Let me look. Any of those things are fine reasons to use visual aids, and I'm going to want you to use a visual aid. Be sure to practice with it before you actually give your speech, because visual aids function differently when you're in front of people and when you're sitting down in a lazy boy chair thinking about it. So actually practice with it, because sometimes things don't hold up as easily as you think they're going to, or they might be smaller than what you're thinking. So a little bit of practice can make it smoother for you. All right, all the specs for the speech. It should be a 6 to 8 minute speech on either fact, value, or policy. Make sure that you have an intro, body, conclusion, transitions. Make sure that everything's clear, that you have sufficient supporting material. You need to have logos in here, at least 2 valid types of reasoning, and varied supporting materials. I don't want to have all of your support come from one particular source or type of source. So I want you to try to be creative in what you're finding out there. Let's say you're going to give a speech about exercising, and you decide that you are going to convince us all that we need to train for a marathon. It's happened before. I've had a great speech on this. I haven't done it, but it did make me stop and think. All right, so let's say I'm going to give the speech on convincing people that they need to train for a marathon. I don't want to have all my information coming from one particular doctor. I don't want to have it all coming from a particular case study. I don't want to only use examples while I'm arguing. I want to bring in different types so that I have some quotes or information from a doctor, some case study, some examples. Okay? Variety, different types of reasoning here. The pathos again, that there needs to be an emotional connection that you have with the material, but also then that you've incorporated this, whether it is through the examples that you choose, the material, the language that you're including, and then for the ethos, 5 credible sources, and I want you to have at least one counter argument. Many times in a persuasive speech, we don't take the time to think about, what does the opposition say? But we should. We need to think about, what does the other side think? Why do they think that? And how can I turn it around to make my point stronger? Now for the delivery. The voice, conversational, natural, no reading. Eye contact. 75% of your eye contact should be to the audience. Imagine those 3 zones, left, middle, right, and make your eye contact long, that when you look at, say, the right side, that you are looking for a long moment, a couple beats. So I'm about to look at my audience to the right, and I'm looking now. I'm talking to them directly. Now I can switch and look to the middle. So I've let a couple beats go by. So I'm looking at the middle, and I've talked another sentence or two. That's enough. And now I can move to the left and talk to the left. Now I can move back and look at the right. So we need to have these long contact. You can't do the look at the right, look at the middle, look at the left too fast. Your gestures should be natural. There should be some kind of emphasis. So if you're saying something of interest or importance, that you're using these gestures there. I like to see that in there. If you have naturally small gestures, that's okay. Just use them wisely, use them well. If you're somebody who tends towards the large ones, wonderful. Use your large gestures. Movement, don't be chained to one place. Try to actually move your feet in a way that you are not in one position for the entire speech. With the online class, it is too easy to become almost mired in one place where your feet just don't move. I'd like you to move one time, hopefully. I'm not going to fail you over this, but I would like to see you try to make at least one movement, one step away from where you've given the speech. Improvement, any of the areas I've identified as needing work, that's what I want you to be working on improving for this speech. Now, it's your turn. Go forth and speak. I can't wait to hear all that you have to tell us.